welcome everyone to episode 7 of the Argument Clinic. I'm your host, Martin, and with me I have Lawrence. How are you doing, Lawrence?
Not too bad. How about yourself?
Not too bad. I am also doing not too bad. We also have another special guest who we'll introduce during the first formal segment that we have. Really excited to have her. She's great. So welcome to the Argument Clinic. If this is your first time, if this is your 7th time, if it's your 84th time and you're listening in reverse order, welcome. This is an LD podcast for everyone. I'm Martin, he's Lawrence, and together we go through some of the fundamental topics in debate. Whether you're a seasoned coach, whether you're a seasoned debater, whether you're an unseasoned debater, whether you're just a novice, no matter how much experience you have, maybe you just want to have a good time and like listening to some Lincoln Douglas debate related content. This is the podcast for you. We've gotten a lot of people in the United States listening to us. We also have a couple of random listens from totally random countries in Europe. Whether this is because you have a SoundCloud account that you set up when you were in Germany, I choose to believe that just random German people listen to the podcast. That's what I choose to believe, the one or two of you. But that's good, and good for you all. So, Lawrence, what did you do last weekend?
Not much, except take the photo that you sent me from the pen round robin and post it. And that's basically all I did.
That's true. I went to the University of Pennsylvania round robin, which was a delight. Had some great judging. Got to hang out with one of my faves and his mom. It was pretty sweet. So that was good. Lasted like basically just one day. It was a nice little tournament. Okay, so before we move on to the substance of the podcast, I'd like to give a special shout out to our sponsor, Victory Briefs. Victory Briefs is a premier debate camp in the United States. They are where I'm going to be teaching this summer and where I've taught in the past. It's where Lawrence works. It really has some of the best instruction that the country has to offer, and I encourage you all, especially in this crunch time for deciding camps, to choose that camp. I believe spots are filling up as well. I would take the opportunity to jump at those things. They have 3 different sessions, so they're very flexible with scheduling. Basically, any time from July 1st onward, you can decide to take a 2-week debate camp. So they're very flexible, which is one of VBI's strengths. Lawrence, what do you think about Victory Briefs?
We just released a new set of Curriculum Corner posts. So Martin, not Martin, the other M, Marshall, wrote an excellent post about like Plato's musings on teaching people about debate and about lab. And we're also having a Victory Briefs AMA on Reddit next weekend, I believe. So if you're still like thinking about whether or not to come to camp, feel free to ask us. We'll be running the AMA all day.
By the way, totally happy to be confused with Marshall Thompson at any point. If at any point you just want to think that I'm Marshall Thompson, I'm totally down for that. Marshall is my man. And by that I mean he probably regards me in sort of a aloof way. But from my perspective, we're buds. Okay, so 2 more things. First, send us an email to the argumentclinicpodcast@gmail.com. We've been getting a lot of wholesome or not some wholesome emails from random people. Oh, special shout out, by the way, to Rex Evans, who I met at the Woodward tournament, who said he listens to the podcast, who did very well at Woodward. Special shout out to that person. He's the man. And also try to leave us a good iTunes review so that we get further up on the debate page, etc., etc. Okay, so now into the substance of the episode. What we have here is an Art of War episode, and if you remember, those episodes are where we discuss kind of improving at the activity of Lincoln Douglas debate. How do you get the skills you need when you're in a debate round to shine, as opposed to just knowing something about how the activity works? And Lawrence, what is our Art of War topic for this week?
The most exciting thing you could possibly do in debate, drills.
Oh yeah, drills. Drills are one of my no joke, one of my favorite things about debate. Drills are awesome, and I'm glad to be able to talk about them on the podcast. And so After this short break, we'll discuss what those are and some of the intro drills to do. All right, so time to welcome our guest on the podcast, Cameron McConway. How are you, Cameron?
Hey, I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I am not bad, as Lawrence said, and I repeated. So, you graduated last year, is that right?
Yeah, I did from Cypher High School.
Cypher High School, and you did debate, of course.
Yes.
Okay, so you debated. So where is Cypher? Like where in the country? Like I'm from Florida. Lawrence is from Oklahoma, I think.
Yeah. So Cypher is just north of Houston, Texas.
Texas. Okay, I don't know if we've had someone in the podcast. Yeah. So first person from Texas. We've had two New Yorkers. So hopefully this is a step in the right direction. So drills, very basically, is when you do an activity outside of the context of a debate round to improve your skills at debating. So any of the various things that you could consider someone to be good at, such as being fluent, such as having good word economy, which is making a good amount of arguments using as few words as possible that people can still understand. You know, there's being persuasive, there's carrying a good cross-examination. All of these things don't need to be improved just in a debate round. You can also spend some time to improve them outside of debate. And drills are the little practice sessions that you do in order to improve those things. So, Lawrence and Cameron, what are some reasons to do drills? Now, I did not do that many drills as a debater. A lapse for which I would pay for dearly by the end of my career. But so why should the people at home, why should they be doing their drills, Lawrence? We'll start with you.
Well, so the first thing I think is just simply that obviously doing something makes you better at it. So like the more practice rounds you have, for instance, the better you get at debate. Like the more debate rounds you have, the better you get. But you don't have like enough time every single day to have a full practice round. So it's kind of best to do drills where you make the most of your limited amount of time and just focus on the things that you need to focus on instead of having full practice rounds every day.
Yeah, that's a good point. So Cameron, the general idea, correct me if I'm wrong, is that if you want to improve at debate, basically experience is the best way to do it. And I view drills as kind of like a proxy for experience. Is that about right?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would also say that for debaters who don't have a lot of teammates or people they know in the activity to practice with to do practice debates, drills can be a way to do that by yourself and still improve.
That's a really good point. Yeah, not everyone has access to kind of like gargantuan teams and have the ability to have practice rounds, or maybe it just doesn't work with their schedule. Maybe they work a job or something that prevents them from having practice rounds. And drills are good places to iron out some of that. And one other reason to do drills, before we get into some of the substance of the drills that we'll do, is that, the actual time in a debate round that is devoted to various important things is kind of small, right? Like the amount of cross-ex time you have, for example, Cameron, is very small in an actual debate, right? I mean, it's only like 6 minutes of the whole round.
Yeah, and only 3 of them are yours.
Yeah, only 3 of them are yours. So basically what that means is if you want to spend time just getting really good at, for example, cross-ex, if you know that that's your weakness, really practice rounds are not going to be super helpful all the time because you only get 3 minutes worth of practice. Whereas if you can just kind of sit down and do targeted practice, improving a targeted skill that you have, that's like a uniquely good thing to get. Now, I can definitely speak for myself here. I did not do that many drills when I was like a senior, for example, in debate. It just wasn't really a thing that I did. I had way more practice rounds than drills, but I definitely regret it. So how are you all at doing drills during your careers?
So when I was younger, because I'm Asian, my parents forced me to do piano. So, like, I had to do a bunch of drills for that. If anyone played piano, everyone, I think, knows the Hannon exercises, which are just finger warm-ups, as well as to, like, improve dexterity or specific fingers, like, that you need to get better at, like, your third and fourth fingers and stuff. And so that sort of, like, must drill when you play piano, or even, like, drilling when you're playing sports, like practicing free throws in basketball, I think translated a lot into debate, where I actually ended up doing a lot of drills on my own because I realized, well, hey, doing, like, a full practice round doesn't really help me improve at specific things that I need to get better at. If, like, my weakest point is the 1AR, it doesn't really make sense to give a 45-minute practice round and only 4 of that is the 1AR. It doesn't really help. So I sort of took that and did a lot of drills in high school using that sort of, like, Asian piano mentality. I think, like, before nationals, for instance, I gave, like, probably over 100, like, 1ARs.
Whoa!
Yeah. I mean, like, a lot of them were from practice rounds, and then immediately after the practice round, like, I would redo it. So I probably had, like, 20 practice rounds total.
Whoa!
Like, 10 on the AF and 10 on the neg. And so, like, after that, redo each of those 1ARs a few times. And then just, like, at home, in the week or so leading up to nationals, just, like, every day, give a few 1ARs. Because that was the speech that I was by far the weakest at. So I had to give a lot of those.
And Cameron, what was your relationship with drills? Are you on the Martin Sigelo laziness school of thought, or the Lawrence Zhao drill school of thought?
I definitely was not as religious about drills as Lawrence. I probably should have been better about it. I did a lot of drills my junior year when I was a little more invested, but during my senior year, I got very busy with, like, college applications. And I think that's something a lot of debaters experience. It's like less motivation.
Makes sense.
Now you go to the college that is the exact rival of the one that I go to.
That's true, but unlike yours, mine is better.
Wait, like Texas and Oklahoma, are they like rivals or something?
Yeah. We have an entire weekend.
OU Texas.
Okay. I'll take your word for it. All I remember was that at Emory, who did not have a football team, we apparently had sports rivalries with various schools, but they were useless because no one at either school knew that they existed. It was like, apparently, like, we were like enemies with Wash U or something, but the only people that knew that were the athletes. Everyone else didn't know or care or show up to sports games. So that's the relationship that I have with college sports. So I assume that is not the same.
No, it's like an actual vacation. Like, a lot of our professors will give us Friday classes off to go to OU Texas.
Wow, that's actually kind of sick, because then I just wouldn't go and I'd get a free day off, and that'd be awesome.
Well, half of our professors are either at the Texas OU game or they're at ACL. So we have 2 weekends where there's significantly less homework.
ACL, is that's like a ligament, right?
Or Austin City Limits, the music festival.
I see. Okay, so, listeners, I'll leave it to you to decide which of those Cameron meant. Okay. So for the rest of the podcast, we're going to be talking about specific types of drills to do. What we're going to do is we're going to explain kind of like how to do a drill, and kind of like break that down for you, and then give you kind of the benefits of some of those drills in a kind of quick way. So we're going to have 3 segments, including this one. We're going to talk first about redos. Then we're going to talk about speaking drills, and then at the end we're going to talk about cross-sex drills. And then we're, of course, going to wrap up and have the only important segment of our podcast, the mini debate. And then at the end, I'm going to tell you to stay frosty, like I always do. So the first section that we'll talk about now, and in many ways one of the most important ones that Lawrence mentioned, is redos. So redos, Lawrence, meaning what? Like, what is a redo? What is redone?
So you just redo a speech that you gave previously, although some of these redo type drills, we're going to call them redos, but there won't be technical redos from an earlier practice debate or earlier actual debate that you had at a tournament. But in general, a redo is a speech that you previously gave and that you're going to redo, except this time with specific objectives in mind.
Okay, so you just give the speech again, right?
Yeah, if you want to make it that simple.
But if you want to, but you like impose conditions on it sometimes.
Yeah. Okay,
so the the first, so there are a bunch of different types of redos, and kind of they're related to the conditions that you are put under. So Cameron, the first type of redo is just kind of like a generic redo. Just a sort of straight redo, just give the speech again, no real specific, random constraint on it. But what are some of the ways that you should go about thinking about how to do a redo?
I think the most important thing is to think about what arguments are the most important that you wanted to get across. And that usually pertains to redos where you're thinking about fixing time management issues, which I think is one of the main reasons that people do redos. I also think another reason people will do a redo for a specific speech is to cover an issue that they did not handle properly. In that case, you'd want to make sure you're putting special emphasis on that issue.
Yeah, that's definitely true. A lot of times you get told by maybe a judge on the ballot that they write to you, or sometimes even in person, you get someone saying to you things like, well, I thought that you were winning most of the issues in the debate, but on this one issue you were particularly poor. And then, you come out of that round being like, dang it, I was pretty good in that debate, except for this one issue. Well, maybe I should practice giving a speech where I improve my debating on that issue. So, Lawrence, is this most of the types of redos that you gave going into nationals?
Yeah, just straight redos. And I think the reason I chose to do just straight redos as opposed to some of the other drills that we'll talk about later is just because it's the most realistic drill that directly translates into actual debate rounds. Because some of the other types of drills that we're going to talk about are really important to do, and we encourage you to do them. But the straight redo is the one that just directly translates to better speech. If you gave a poor 1AR in a practice round and you give a few redos until it's up to par, then it's directly going to translate into better 1ARs in the future. So that's the reason I just sort of did straight redos mostly. And because I thought that even though focusing on smaller specific parts of the 1AR that I'd messed up, doing the full straight redo allowed to see how the speech as a whole was persuasive to other people as opposed to just one specific segment of the speech that I thought was worse. But I was more concerned with how to integrate all of that together into a full speech.
Yeah, this is also fairly easy to do by yourself, right? I mean, you don't really need much. You just do the thing again.
Yeah, just pick what you did wrong, do it better in this speech,
You can even record yourself and then replay it so you can see if you've improved.
That's true. That definitely, it burns. Listening to yourself speak, especially in recordings, it's not fun.
Yeah, I don't listen to this podcast. I mean, not only because I edit this thing, so why would I listen to it again? But just the sound of my voice just haunts me.
I listened to our entire episodes all the way back through again, and let me tell you, the sound of my voice is just so good. It's just excellent. There's nothing that I like better than hearing the sound of my voice repeated back to me over the internet. Okay, so when we were in that segment, we kind of talked about the benefits of a straight redo. Now, the second type of redo are what are called, quote, hell, end quote, 1AR or 2Ms. So what does it mean, Cameron, that this is a speech that you are sort of in hell for?
So hell 1ARs and 2NRs were actually my favorite as a debater. And they usually involve somebody giving you a longer or more difficult speech to answer than you would for a real 1AR or 2NR. But you have real speech time to answer it. So it's more content for you to cover in a usual timed speech.
Yeah, so it's from hell in the sense that it's I don't know, you're debating against a demon or something, and they're like, ha ha ha, I have 15 minutes, right? Here's a million case turns. Something like that. That's the kind of imagery that we're trying to conjure up here.
Yeah, I would say that's accurate.
Yeah. Anyone who's ever really had to do these as a debater can tell you that they are very difficult, as well they should be. So I definitely did not do these anywhere near as much as I should have. This was one of the things that I really didn't do. So Lawrence, why might you want to do a Hell 1AR or 2N?
Well, it really increases your efficiency. I think Cameron was talking a little bit about this earlier. And like it's sort of why before a baseball game, people like before they go up to bat, they'll swing like 2 or 3 bats all at once, because that's pretty difficult to swing 3 bats at once. Like it makes it, it's like really heavy. It's like not very easy to swing. But when you get up to plate and you're only holding 1 bat, well, it seems like a breeze. It's so light. It's so easy to do. And so once you give a 4-minute 1AR against a 14-minute 1NC, like 14 minutes long, like double the normal speech time. Once you get into debate round, everything is just super easy. It's just a breeze. You're super efficient now because instead of being like, oh no, I only have 4 minutes to answer 14 minutes worth of arguments, you're like, I have 4 minutes to answer 7 minutes worth of arguments. This is so easy. This is like a breeze, a walk in the park. And I did it, in fact, with the kid that I was coaching at Nationals last year, where I had his former teammate read every conceivable possible negative argument on the topic and like just every single one we could possibly find, like every card from the briefs in there into like a 15-minute 1NC, and made him give the 1AR like maybe 5 or 6 times over until it was 4 minutes long and answered all of the arguments.
I believe we
No, go
did.
ahead.
Oh, sorry. I believe we did this one year at camp where we had everyone in the lab read a 7-minute 1NC strategy to an affirmative, and then that debater had to give a 1AR and win against everybody from the lab giving an NC.
How'd they do?
It was not successful, but it was helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember something similar to that at camp. It was a rising sophomore lab also, so it was like a special amount of failure. Yeah, so be breezy, which Lawrence says to people every day.
I don't talk to other people.
Okay, that was an interesting response. So okay, the next type of redo is for shortened speeches. So what we've done is we've distinguished this from the Hell 1ARs and the Hell 2Ns, although of course you could give a Hell 1AR, and if you're just like truly masochistic, you could really just keep cranking down on the amount of time it takes you to answer it, such that you have to give like a 2-minute speech against a 14-minute one. But basically, a shortened 1AR and a 2N is just, instead of increasing the number of arguments you respond to, you just decrease the amount of time that you have to answer those arguments. So, Lawrence, what might this look like? So let's say you have a 1AR to redo. So what would shortening it look like kind of just from your perspective?
Yeah, so someone reads their 7-minute speech, their negative speech, they answer the case, they read a negative case, and you start with giving what you think is like a really good 4-minute 1AR. You think it's efficient, it sounds good, it covers all of the key arguments, and what you do is you keep on shortening your speech time by like maybe 15 or 30 seconds, and you only sacrifice the arguments you think are not of the highest quality, such that you are still making the same amount of high quality arguments, just more efficiently and with less like unnecessary verbiage or less unnecessary arguments in there. And you just cut down the time as much as possible. And try to get it to like maybe 3 minutes, 2:30, or even if you're like really, really efficient or really, really good, you can get a 1AR down to 2 minutes and make the same quantity of high quality arguments as you were in a 4-minute speech. And if you can do that, then you've got the 1AR down.
Yeah, nice. So, Cameron, you were saying off air that you tended to combine these speeches with Hell speeches. So, how did you survive that?
Well, not with my sanity. I think that explains a lot about me now as a person.
Hey.
But it does make 1ARs a lot easier to give, because when you do them in an actual debate round, it seems much less intimidating.
That's definitely true. I found that the more drills that I did, like the breeze thing that Lawrence was saying, when I got into a real debate round, I was like, how do people lose these? And then I would still lose them. But.
Yeah, I still lost plenty of rounds.
Okay, and the last type of redo is a compartmentalized speeches. Lawrence, you wrote this. So what is a compartmentalized speech?
So it's just a small part of the speech where you only focus on a specific set of arguments or group of single argument or a group of similar arguments, and you respond to them within a sort of pre-allotted amount of time that you generally shorten down. And the reason for this is because sometimes a lot of debate rounds, as you mentioned earlier, are lost on close things. Like the judge is saying, "Hey, you're winning a lot of these arguments, but I just think you really mishandled the negative second contention." And so instead of unnecessarily redoing the parts of the 1AR that were in fact good, you pick the part that you thought was the weakest, or part of the 2NR that you thought was weakest, or part of the 2AR you thought was weakest, and very specifically focus on just that part of the speech until you can get it to what you think is perfect within a certain amount of time, and then keep on shortening that time down until you sort of get the same amount of warranting out in just like a more efficient manner. And this allows you to just target the weakest parts of a speech and make that specific part better.
Yes, so you aren't redoing the entire speech, right? You're only redoing a slice of it. That's the difference.
Yeah, exactly.
So you just like redo this like 30-second stretch for like lots of times?
Yeah, and like I judged a bunch of debates about the housing topic in Oklahoma, and a lot of these 1ARs are actually pretty solid because it's kind of hard to lose as the AF on a topic that says housing is good versus negatives that say housing is not good. But there will always just be some small part of the 1AR where like maybe they mishandle this argument because they don't put enough responses against it, or they just like really drop the ball on it, and like that would be a good place to do a compartmentalized speech because maybe the extension of the AF case was really good, but they just really needed to focus on answering this one negative argument. Well, instead of redoing the entire 1AR, those debaters should focus on the small part of the 1AR that they didn't do well and then work on improving that.
So Cameron, would you consider, so if you did a compartmentalized speech and there was one issue that you did badly on, that you, as Lawrence say, dropped the ball on it, would you consider doing a compartmentalized redo speech as picking up the ball?
I suppose so. I definitely did this sort of redo with issues that I knew I was particularly weak on.
Yeah, I definitely didn't do many of these compartmentalized speeches, but I was also bad at things, so that makes sense. Okay, so that's it for redos. I think redos are probably the most important thing that we'll talk about on the podcast today. I think doing redos by yourself, doing redos with a teammate to administer the redos with you, doing them with your friends, I think that's the most important drill-based skill. If you learn nothing else from the podcast, knowing how to do these drills is really the best thing. Okay, so in the next segment, we'll talk about speaking drills and persuasion drills. So this next segment, we're going to be talking about kind of the more persuasion-oriented drills. In the last segment, we talked about how to redo a specific speech. This one is going to be more about how to improve your skills sort of very specifically when you're in that speech. So we have two things. We have speaking drills and we have persuasion drills. Generally, what we mean by speaking drills is improving just, the kind of reading/written word that you are doing in a debate. Persuasion drills are going to focus on kind of the content of what you're talking to the judge about, whereas speaking drills are going to focus more on the form, if that makes sense. So, speaking drills. The first set of speaking drills are fluency drills. So, Lawrence, what is a fluency drill, and why should I do one?
So a fluency drill is just basically, doing basically not that. So every time you stumble, say are repetitive, are lost for words, use the term as I said earlier, pause, you have to sort of start over because all of these things detract from the overall fluency or the overall sort of persuasive nature of your speech because speeches that contain a lot of ums, uhs, pauses, stumbles, repeats, etc., don't tend to be viewed as very persuasive by most judges, regardless of where that judge is from. And so in order to combat that, you do a drill where you have to get through a pre-allotted amount of time, so be it like 1 minute, 4 minutes, 10 minutes even, of either a speech that you're extemping off the top of your head or a rebuttal redo, where every time you do one of those bad things, you have to start over until you make it to that pre-allotted sort of time that you've set for yourself.
So, Cameron, what was your relationship with fluency drills?
I did a lot of them going into my senior year on specific issues that I had trouble with, because when I would get stuck in a debate round, I would have a lot of fluency issues. I know that my big thing, everybody has some word that they say that is incredibly inefficient and that they just put in when they have trouble or can't think of something, and mine was additionally, which is a long word.
That adds up.
Yeah, it really did.
A bunch of additionalies. My word was thus, but at least that was a syllable. So it wasn't that bad. But thus times 50 is an argument. So that's bad for sure. I definitely think, by the way, that my victories at the state tournament, I never won it, of course, like Lawrence a million times, but I did well at it, and that was almost certainly in part to me just doing fluency drills. For me, the word was like.
Ooh.
Which is a word that is annoying and also very common, which means that, like, a lot of times when you have, like, a parent judge, they're just used to their teen daughter saying like all the time and they can't stand it. And then you come into their debate round and you start saying like, and they're just like, this is the worst. So.
My mom used to have a like jar in our house where she would make us put a quarter in every time we used the word like unnecessarily.
Really?
Yeah, completely serious.
Oh, wow. That is a policy you could adopt if you were a parent, I suppose.
This was pre-debate too.
Did it work?
No.
No, you just paid a bunch of money.
Oh, it was more at my brother than me.
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah. I'm like not actually a naturally good speaker. I just had to do a bunch of fluency drills because I still use the word a bunch, but this is mostly because I don't do fluency drills anymore, unlike when I did debate and stopped saying the word and that was really important because I was like terrible at speaking. I had no inflection. I had like no ability to like make coherent thoughts. I had no ability to sound persuasive. It was just a bunch of fluency drills over and over. And the other experience I've had with fluency drills was actually my first year teaching at the Victory Briefs Institute. And this is a very popular drill to do with younger labs, is to like have fluency drills. And some labs take it a little too far, where they every time someone stumbles, instead of like making them just start over, they'll like have a squirt gun and like shoot them with water or something like that. But our drill was done with a bunch of middle schoolers who all got a piece of paper to throw at this person whenever they would stumble or mess up. And it was a terrible mistake to do that because it was like a room of 12 or so kids. As soon as someone said the word they would all just throw as much paper as possible at them. We probably wasted like 500 sheets of paper doing this drill. And we had to like clean up all
huge amount of paper.
Yeah, because we just gave them like parts of a stack and we're just like, here. We didn't think they were going to use it all because I was like, you should rip it into like a few smaller pieces to throw at them, and you shouldn't really be throwing that much. But literally, as soon as someone said the word just a wall of paper would just hit them. And it was a horrible mistake because it also took like 15 minutes to clean up the room because there's just paper everywhere. So
my senior year lab at VBI adopted a similar policy, but it was in punishment for when we were late to lab. You had to do fluency drills in front of the entire lab, and the rest of the lab would count your inefficiencies and your fluency breaks and then throw paper at you every time you repeated the mistake.
Yeah, so let's not do that. But I guess if you're a coach that just really likes to make your students suffer, I guess you can institute fluency drills where you have everyone throw paper at the person who's speaking.
So Lawrence, you mentioned inflection drills. Conveniently, that's our next drill. So what is an inflection drill, Lawrence?
So most people talk relatively flat during speeches because they're too nervous, and so all they do is really speak flat. And you'll notice here that I keep my voice relatively low because that's just sort of normally how it is. But in debate, in order to add inflection to things, I would actually raise my voice to a higher register, which allowed me to sort of increase or decrease the tone of my voice in order to add to the persuasive speaking ability that I had. Because if you listen to really good public speakers, most of them don't talk flat. They have emotional inflections or inflections at the right points to get you to listen in on things, and it sounds a lot different. So I'm going to switch to my debate voice really quickly and just be like, well, adding inflection to things is really persuasive and helps change the overall tone and message that you're delivering. Because talking like a flat, boring person really doesn't get judges to pay attention or care about what you're talking about. But simply adding just a little bit of inflection can really change the overall tone of your speech. And so, yeah, change it like that.
Okay, so inflection is not something that you do at the gym, for example.
I don't think so. I guess you could try to give inflection drills at the gym and see how long it takes for you to get beat up.
Nice.
This would require debaters going to the gym.
Hey, shots fired. Pew, 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 pew. Yeah, so increasing or decreasing the tone of your voice at the appropriate time is really how you would do it. So how would you kind of do it in a drill form, Cameron?
So I think inflection drills generally involve reading your case or a written paragraph with an excessive amount of intonation or emphasis on certain words that you wouldn't normally emphasize. It sounds pretty silly too, if you do it in public.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I've done a lot with my kids, and that I think people do at camp too, is just to have a drill where you overemphasize every syllable.
Yeah, exactly. And it sounds really silly.
So you go really slowly, you emphasize every syllable, and it's kind of hard to say this without you looking at us, but what I'm doing is I'm taking every mouth movement and I'm stretching my mouth out really wide. I'm just every time my tongue moves, I make it move sort of the maximum possible amount to sort of get the full range of inflection out on the table. So, Lawrence, is that kind of what you did for inflection drills as well?
I actually didn't do that many of them. I mostly just did general speaking drills, which we'll get into next. But I think another way to approach them is to listen to speeches online that you think are really good and persuasive, be it they from his past historical speakers like MLK or whoever you think is good at giving a TED Talk, for instance, and sort of trying to give a speech that emulates a lot of the inflection that they have. And that will help in sort of the persuasive nature. Because if you realize that someone else is persuasive, just copying them is generally an easy way to improve.
Nice.
I think I got better at inflection and speaking when I started doing extemporaneous speaking, which was mandatory on my debate team. It definitely helped a lot with more traditional style debate.
Yeah, I agree. Because I did extemp too, but the thing was I wasn't really willing to do that much research for it, so I compensated for not having a lot of evidence in my extemp speeches by simply just going hard for the I'm a good speaker sort of thing. Because at state my senior year, the person who won nationals in domestic extemp twice 2 years in a row cited more pieces of evidence in his first round speech than I cited in all of prelims and finals combined, because I just didn't do as much work, but I still did well because I practiced inflection and just general type speaking drills.
I'm not sure I should admit this, but I made up evidence.
You should not admit that.
Whatever.
Yeah.
So, the trick is you cite the same.
This is a safe space for extemp cheaters, okay?
So the trick is you don't make up evidence.
Yeah.
You just find one piece of evidence and cite it 3 different ways. So according to an
Okay,
article
well, no,
from
that's
the
what
New
I
York
did.
Times,
That's what I did.
according to this article title, and according to this article written by X person. There you go.
The closest that I ever was to doing a non-LD event was first, one time I asked my kind of best debate buddy, and we shared all of our prep and prepped together for tournaments. I tried to get the CFL League to allow us to go to a tournament in public forum as a mixed team, but they wouldn't let us, which was a huge tilt. And then the second time was when I tried to go to NSDA quals, at the time NFL quals in Congress. But I could. So I kind of wish that I had done extemp though for some tournaments. It definitely would have helped me improve at things.
I think it made me a better writer as well.
Okay. So before we go into persuasion drills, let's talk general speaking drills then. So Lawrence, you mentioned these. You put this down. What did you have in mind here? You have down things like poetry, and so what did you intend with general speaking drills?
Well, so unlike fluency drills where you have to restart every single time, or inflection drills which sort of emphasize overemphasizing things, general speaking drills are just like things like pen drills, which focus on improving enunciation or simply just giving good speeches. So I say reading poetry because this is something that really helped some people that I work with, which is just like poetry is supposed to be very beautiful when written and read aloud. If you can read poetry in a way that sounds good to other people, well, you're going to give more persuasive speeches. And same thing with listening to historical speeches that are really good, giving those and sounding persuasive. So just doing a bunch of general type speaking drills like pen drills, reading speeches, giving extemp speeches, none of which require the same aspects as the fluency and inflection drills, is also a really good way to improve your speaking overall.
So I know that poetry and reading a persuasive speech written by someone else are both like interp oratory events that you can do.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying like become a drama kid, but I am saying that like
did you guys know that that's what declamation was, by the way?
Oh, yeah.
No, my district never did that.
Declamation is actually you just read a persuasive speech written by someone else, which is why it's baby oratory and only novices get to do it.
Yeah. Well, in like Oklahoma, it's called like standard oratory, which is you just like take an oratory written by someone else and like cut it down so it's within the 10-minute mark and give that. And I had to do that my freshman and sophomore years.
Yeah, all I know is that in Florida you can only do dec like in sort of like a novice way.
Yeah,
I don't
exactly.
know. I don't know if that's true nationally.
But like I'd say that helped because in fairness, that was standard oratory was the only thing I qualified to the state tournament in my freshman year because I wasn't good enough to make it in debate or extemp. But like that was like a helpful thing to like know how to give a speech by someone who is funnier and smarter than me in a way that sort of tried to emulate their persuasiveness and their ability to connect with audiences. And those were like super helpful things to like improve my persuasiveness.
Okay, so all right, so we have general speaking drills, we have inflection drills, and we have fluency drills. So before we move on to persuasion drills, there's one just quick thing that I wanted to mention, which was just a personal thing that I found very much helped me when I was trying to get better at debate. So I don't know if this is a problem that either of you had, but I had a problem with stuttering when I was starting out / just a couple seconds ago. But I don't know if this is a thing that has afflicted you guys, but I used a very specific strategy to get out of stuttering. And it was actually inflection and being loud. I found that, and I'm not saying this works for everyone, I am saying that it's worked for me and for one other person who I worked with at camp who stuttered a lot. It turns out that if you're really loud, you don't have the volume or the breath to stutter. If you're fluent, if you focus on expelling sort of a lot of air, then I found it becomes a lot more difficult to stutter. I don't know if you all had similar experiences, but I just wanted to throw that out to you all because I know that with stuttering, it can be hard to be coherent. It's one of the reasons why I lost a lot of rounds my sophomore year, and especially in front of lay judges. I just lost all my rounds because I stuttered a lot. So this was a way that I overcame that my junior year. So Lawrence, Cameron, do either of you have experiences with the stutterings?
I personally didn't. My issues in debate with speaking generally tended to be forgetting where my sentences were going or using filler words. And for that, I found I would just slow down and I would stop messing myself up and forgetting where my sentence needed to end, which also eliminated my need for filler words.
I see. And Lawrence, I take it this wasn't a problem for you?
No, just like the general ability to like make sentences not sound like trash was really it. But stuttering was never too much of an issue for me, thankfully.
I see. Well, if you have a problem with stuttering, this is maybe a thing that you should do to try and help out. Speaking of the sentences thing, by the way, there was this debater. He was actually a policy debater who went to Emory, and he started writing for one of the publications that I wrote for, and it was actually hilarious. I can probably find some of the drafts that this kid did. This kid almost won the TOC in policy like twice. He got to finals like twice, and you could so tell whenever he was writing anything because he would just have one sentence. So he would start a sentence and then he would go for like 10 more lines and then it would always end with nuclear war. Like the sentence wouldn't end. It would be like, if someone doesn't do this, then this will happen, which might cause this, which might cause this, which might cause this, which might cause this, which might cause nuclear war. And I was like, Nate, this isn't policy debate. You need to like put some periods in there, space them out, like, stretch them out. So there you go. Okay, so the next section we have here is persuasion drills. So this is going to be about the content rather than the form of trying to improve at persuasion. So we have two types here. The first is storytelling. Lawrence, what did you have by storytelling, and how would you suggest that our listeners go about storytelling?
So storytelling, I think we sort of talked about this in the Judge adaptation episode, is really just a synthesis of all of the arguments or the important arguments in the round into a sort of easy to understand, cohesive story for the judge that they could easily translate into a winning ballot for you. And that's kind of abstract, but though I think the way to sort of get about to storytelling is at the end of the debate, does the judge sort of have to ask any questions to fill in the blanks, or have you really done it all for them in an easy to understand manner? And so, for example, like when you're reading a book, it's not a really good book if it's just undercut by you constantly asking questions about like, what about this obviously gaping plot hole device, or what about what if how does this make sense in relation to something else? So, for example, like the Star Wars movies have like huge plot holes because of the prequels, thanks George Lucas, and it sort of undercuts the ability to sell that story because it has so many questions. So when you do storytelling, you focus on the overall message that you're trying to sell, such that it eliminates the need for the judge to ask questions, and they simply just sort of follow along with what you're going for, and then they vote for you, hopefully. And so how to do this sort of storytelling stuff is basically just practice at redoing a bunch of speeches where instead of focusing super heavily on like line by line sort of things, you instead focus on the general reason for why your side is correct in a very easy to understand story-like format.
I think that was pretty comprehensive. I don't really have anything to add here. Cameron, do you have something to add, or do you just think Lawrence is perfect like I do?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much the benefit of that drill and how it works. Yeah, no, I don't have much to add.
Yeah, Lawrence, you're perfect. Confirmed. Okay, and then the second thing is kind of overview drills. So what is an overview drill, Lawrence? This is a thing that you also put in.
Well, in fairness, I did take a lot of inspiration for some of these lesser-known drills from an article that Danny Dubois wrote called like Drilling Like a Villain, which is something that you can look up if you're interested in drills. I think the difference between the overview stuff, which is an overview is just like, here's the big picture of the round at the top, is that the storytelling is basically the last thing that you do in a debate. Like the ending of the debate is you piecing together all of the arguments that have existed, and you're synthesizing them together into an effective story that is like the ending of your rebuttal. That's the story you're telling them. Whereas I think the overview stuff is a little bit different because it's generally done at the beginning of a speech. It is the, view that you have at the beginning, and like you're going to roadmap it out how this debate is going to play out. And the way that Danny recommends doing it, and the way that I also recommend doing it, is just like don't worry about the line by line, and instead start at the top of the speech and realize what the big picture arguments are and how they fit together at the beginning.
And so you just don't address any of the line by line issues as well.
Yeah, you sort of just piece everything together into a, at the beginning of the speech, like, this is what I'm going to do, and then you just go into the speech. But instead of being, like, line by line technical, whatever people call it, you just focus on giving a giant overview of the debate.
Okay, so I definitely did not do any drills that were, like, directly this, but I will
Neither did I.
say, but I will say,
Yeah, no.
but I will say that I did a lot of these things like in rebuttal redos, where, as I explained in the last episode, one of my major benefits as debater was that I was phenomenally lazy, especially in lay rounds, and therefore, if there was one thing that I thought I was winning, I'd just talk about it the entire time. So I definitely, in order to fill up my time, had to get into some overview stuff and be like, Judge, I got this one argument, and I'm just gonna sort of rant about how it connects to everything else, kind of like, a conspiracy board or something. Like what are those boards called where like people they have like safe where they pin pictures to like like a board or whatever, and then like draw string between them, like things that you see in cop movies or dramas or whatever. It's like you have like a picture of this bad guy, and you it's over a map, and you like pull a string over to this other picture of this other person. And do you all know what I'm talking about, or am I just nuts?
I watch Criminal Minds. I know what you're talking about. I have no idea what it's called.
Yeah.
I just think you're nuts.
Well, I am nuts independently of that, so that makes sense.
We already knew that.
Hey, okay, so okay, those are persuasion drills and speaking drills, and when we're back in a few seconds, we'll talk about cross-ex drills. All right, so for our final segment, we're going to be talking about cross-examination drills. And I have to say, cross-examination drills are some of my absolute favorite kinds of drills to do to other people. I say to other people because it was always really good to make other people do these things. So we have two sections here for this segment. We have one, drills for getting cross-exed. And then we have drills for asking somebody else cross-ex questions. So the first one we have here is the 30-minute cross-ex. And I'll talk about this one because I love it. The basic idea is just, and anyone can do this with you, is you just have someone, in sort of a very combative tone of voice, especially if they are not intimately familiar with your case or whatever. You're standing up, and they just do a cross-ex, except they're asking you questions for 30 minutes. So you don't get the nice, graceful reprieve of the timer going off after 3 minutes. They're just going to keep asking you hard questions until you do it. So one thing I like about this is that it's like partially an endurance test. It's just like how much are you able to withstand pressure when you're doing cross-ex? And you really have to know everything about your case. I do this with my debaters before any of their tournaments, basically. I just cross-ex them for a long time until they know all their stuff. Have you guys ever done anything sort of like this?
This was how I prepared for TFA State, which is the Texas State Tournament my senior year. I wrote an AF position that I thought was really strong, and we spent hours getting everybody I knew who was not competing at state to ask me questions about it until it was just incredibly defensible.
It paid off.
Yeah, it worked. The AF didn't lose a round.
Yeah, you made it to semis.
It was when I broke a new AF, and yeah.
Oh, nice. Semis. Semis at TFA States, if you listeners don't know, is really hard. That's like a really, really good achievement. So yeah, I don't know if anyone really did this to me, but yeah, I definitely do it with all of my kids. And the thing is, not only do you have to not only can you fix any holes in your case, you really have to know everything, because most of responding well to cross-ex questions is looking like you know your stuff and not being flustered or not looking like you didn't expect a question. Okay, so next type of, and so all you need to do that drill, by the way, you just literally just need anybody else and a bunch of time. And take that time, have them ask you a bazillion questions about your case until you get down pat answering it. And they can keep asking. They can ask detailed follow-up after follow-up after follow-up after follow-up, and you have to make sure to be on your game. Okay, second, role-playing. So what I have down here for role-playing is basically that someone pretends to be a certain type of cross-examination style. Now, as both of you almost certainly know, there are different types of styles for cross-examination. Some people can be, a little more belligerent than others, and maybe some people are like really condescending. Some people are like super polite, and this is basically a way of like someone cross-exes you for a limited amount of time, but pretends to be those types of people, so you can and like says the sorts of things that they might want to say, so that you have a better sense of what you would say in response to those things. Now, I've definitely never done one of these before.
I've never done this drill, but my lab did this drill this summer. Alex Yoakum and I had our kids. We pulled each one into the hallway separately, assigned them a character, and then had all of them cross-ex each other. And
wow, that sounds glorious.
Yes,
and very
what
funny.
The other person's role was. Or have the kids who were not doing the cross-examination guess what each kid's role was. It was quite fun.
Was it just like very humorous?
Yeah, it was pretty funny. They were funny.
Awesome.
It was a good group of kids.
Yeah, so what you basically need in order to do this drill is you need someone else, but you also need them to have actually know things about debate. They don't need to be very good. They just need to in fact, if they're inexperienced, that might even be a plus in terms of them authentically role-playing. They'll probably, because people that are inexperienced will say stuff that you didn't think of. And that's kind of the goal, is for them to kind of fluster you and you can pick yourself up. Okay, so the next cross-ex drill for getting cross-ex, this is the third. The first one was the 30-minute cross-ex. The second one was role-playing. And the third one is the round robin. So, Lawrence, what is that?
It seems like the type that you do with a team, and I think there are different variations of it. But the one that I sort of used at camp this year was we all sort of just stood in a circle, everyone in the lab, and there was a person in the middle who everyone sort of got to ask them a question for a certain amount of time. So I think for the time's sake, we used like 30 seconds. And we had to get them to admit something. And I think the example that we used that was like murder is bad or something like that. I mean, we had to get them to admit that was a problem. And if they could hold their own against admitting that sort of thing, then they got to get the other person who failed to question them into the center, who then had to defend it. But something like that. And that's the variation that we did, was just everyone in a circle, person in the middle, everyone questions the person in the middle.
Oh, wow. I definitely did not do the thing where you swapped places.
Yeah, I mean, we did that as sort of incentive to be good at asking questions and good at defending.
I did a much more time-intensive, brutal version of this drill, where you would get cross-exed for everyone had 45 seconds to ask you questions. This was in a lab, so it was in 14 other people or whatever, and if you admitted something, you started over from the beginning person, and they got to ask more questions.
Oh my.
Oh my,
That
indeed.
sounds excruciating.
It was excruciating.
Even as a lab leader.
No, it was really funny to watch as a lab leader. Yeah, so Cameron, have you done any of this round robin stuff?
I have not done it like Lauren suggested, but I definitely had a lab where we had to read our case, and each student in the lab got to cross-examine us for 3 minutes. And it was less of a game and more of just a torture device, but it was helpful.
Yeah, I mean, most of these cross-ex drills are just endurance tests in the most positive way that you can imagine an endurance test. But it's just an endurance test all the same. Okay, so now we're going to talk about cross-examining someone. How do you practice doing that? First of all, any of the drills for getting cross-exed, if you are the person that they asked, this is that version of the drill, right? If you have to cross-ex someone for 30 minutes, that is, a drill that you are sort of now doing. So everyone benefits in this scenario. But here are two specific variants of cross-exing someone. So the first, every time you ask a stupid question, you start over. So Lawrence, what did you mean by that? Every time you ask a stupid question, you start over?
So every time you ask a question that some other objective third-party observer, or the person that you're questioning even, sort of perceives to be a waste of your limited cross-ex time, you have to sort of start over. So someone will read a case, and you have to sort of ask them questions about it, and until it's and then as soon as you ask what is perceived to be a stupid or unnecessary or wasteful question, then you have to really sort of start over from the beginning.
Cameron, can you think of any of those questions?
Oh gosh.
How about if I turn your case, do I win? Do you recommend people ask that question?
Generally not. If you ask too obvious of a question, most students are obviously going to see it's a trap and not answer it. So yeah, I suppose that would be an example of a question that would make you start the game over.
How about is your criterion wrong? Your criterion is wrong, isn't it? How's that question?
Right, I think that falls into the above category of too obvious.
Yeah, we have a pretty good list of this. Yeah,
we did a cross-examination episode where we just walked down just a bunch of questions just to never ask someone. And
there's one question that we still don't remember.
Yeah, it was a tragedy. So to those of you who listen to the podcast, what happened in that episode was a bunch of the audio that we recorded the first time was kind of unusable because my Skype cut out at a weird moment. So that meant we had to re-record it the next day. But the first day, we had remembered a type of cross-examination question that was particularly bad. And then by the second day, we forgot it and we couldn't remember it. And we accidentally included 10 minutes of audio of us.
It's 20 minutes.
Trying to remember that question. And through the powers of Lawrence's editing skills, that made its way onto the podcast.
In fairness, we had to record it the night before we released it. And
yeah.
So I was editing this at midnight.
My fault. We had to re-record it I think twice, right?
Yeah.
Because we had to re-record the end segment again. Oh my god, it was awesome. Just kidding, it was bad. Okay, so every time you ask a stupid question, you start over. So refer to our previous episode for stupid question. All right, so the second way when you're cross-exing someone, that type of drill you can do is what's called goal identification, which I don't know what that means. So Lawrence, can you give us the good word?
Yeah, so when we did this drill at camp, it was simply that you had 3 minutes what you would do is you'd write a goal on the board that you wanted, that the person that you were cross-exing couldn't see, and it usually was a lab leader, but it could usually be another student as well. And so it would be something very specific, I want them to admit that this piece of evidence they've cited is out of context, or I want them to admit that the logical conclusion of X argument does not really work, or it contradicts another argument that they've made. And so we identify very specific goals that you want to get out of cross-ex and give them 1 minute to cross-ex that person and to attain that goal, and then sort of have another party make a determination whether or not that goal was attained. And this helps get rid of very scatterbrained or not very focused cross-exes, which are very common, where people are just I got to fill up 3 minutes of question time. What do I ask about? And instead, we narrow in on very specific things that we want to get done and see if we can use cross-ex effectively to get that goal achieved. And if they don't think you achieve that goal, then you have to restart until you can get that person to admit the thing that you want them to admit.
So for this drill, you need what, 3 people?
I mean, you can have if for example you're doing it with a varsity older debater, or even someone who's of equivalent level to you, and they sort of make a determination whether or not you achieved your goal. you could probably just do it with 2 people. It helps to have a third objective observer, like make a determination as to whether or not you achieved your goal. But it's doable with 2 people.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So cross-X drill things are done. So for the rest of this segment, we're actually going to talk about just some war stories we have. Now, the number of stories we actually have about drills is pretty slim, but I can remember some. One that I remember was you can tell how much of a lazy person I was. So I'm sort of generally not lazy, but I was very debate lazy. And so what I did was we had a drill for a hell 1AR where you had to respond to your own AF. So you would like write answers to a lot of the stuff, and then you'd have to give a 1AR in response to it. And I specifically remember getting like destroyed by my lab leaders because I prepped a 1N to my app, but I conveniently like dropped one of my arguments. So then like in the 1AR, I just was like, you dropped this argument. And they were just like, stop, what? They're just like, I was like, yeah, I thought they'd probably drop it. It's like, sit down. I was like, oh no, I didn't realize. I tried to give myself an easier 1AR, and they're like, what are you doing? It was good. I'm trying to remember of other drills that I did. Maybe you guys can think of some stories too, but I remember one drill that I did. So I was at debate camp my rising senior year, and I had gotten like stung by a bee, and I didn't know if I was allergic. So like just in case, they gave me some like Benadryl. So I was feeling pretty sleepy. And so then I walk back into like top lab of this camp, and they're like, oh, perfectly convenient, Martin. We're going to do a cross-X drill with you right now. And I was like, oh my gosh. Like I didn't want to say it, but I was like, I'm pretty out of it. And they're like, oh, it's cross-X drill anyway. And I was like, okay. And so they just like grilled me for 20 minutes. Like under the influence of a drowsy medication. It was not pretty. All right, well, that's all the drill stories I've got. Lawrence, Cameron, do you guys have anything?
Let's see. The one drill that I remember doing from when I was a camper, going into my senior year at Victory Briefs, was a drill where we had to do a straight refutation, which was, as the negative, you had the whole 7-minute speech, but all you could do was respond to affirmative arguments that were being made. But the problem was that the affirmative we were using as the drill model was questionably topical. Like it was probably not a topical affirmative. It did not affirm the resolution. And so normally you would be like, hey, you did not affirm the resolution. That is a problem because it is your job to affirm the resolution as an argument. But we couldn't do that. So we had to spend 7 minutes making only arguments that directly responded to AF claims. And I think the lab leaders just kind of like didn't realize that this AF was not topical because not a single one of us can make it to 7 minutes without making the argument that they weren't topical, which we weren't allowed to do because all we could do was respond to this very specific arguments that the AF made. So I remember having to give this speech in front of my lab, and I wasn't very good at debate then, by the way. So I made it to like the 4-minute mark before I just was like, yeah, I have nothing else to say, and just sat down.
Oh man.
I think the hardest drill I remember having to do as a camper was probably going into my junior year, which I didn't start debate until my sophomore year. And my lab had to do what we called a silver bullet drill, which, if you've never done one of those, is responding to a case that you basically cannot beat unless you have the answer, which is there is one thing about the case that is like wrong or unstrategic, but unless you have this quote unquote silver bullet, you cannot win. And we spent an entire day, not even just a lab session, trying to figure out this silver bullet. And it was just traumatizing.
Oh man. I don't know if I ever did a silver bullet drill, although I've heard of them. Okay, so war stories for drills are pretty slim pickings because you should mostly just be doing these by yourself, and they really shouldn't be the occasion for memory. Instead, the memories that you have should be of the rounds you win because of your drills instead of the drills.
I think the true war story was the fact that my parents had to listen to me give like 101 ARs in my bedroom at random points during the summer when they were home. Just like, why is he talking to himself again? And I'm sure no one really likes listening to the sound of my voice that much. So that's probably the true horror of the war of drills. Is my parents.
They would probably be like, I wonder why Lawrence is doing all those drills. But then they would like look at your multiple state championship trophies that you had already assembled up to that point and be like, oh yeah.
Well, in fairness, Oklahoma is too cheap to provide championship trophies, so they're just medals that say 1 on them.
Oh really?
Oh my goodness.
Well, because there's 4 different divisions. There's every single speech and debate and drama event, and you have to give 6 medals per event. And it's not like Oklahoma funds its teachers particularly well, and certainly not its educational activities. So I was happy that I got a medal.
I think the big horror story for my parents was that I used to make my mom cross-examine me whenever I wrote a case for like nationals, because I wanted to make sure it was, comprehensible to somebody who was not familiar with the state. And so I would read it to my mom. She didn't enjoy that very, very much.
Oh, that sounds fun.
Oh no, I'm sure she resents me quite a lot for it.
All right, so when we get back, we're gonna have a thrilling mini debate. All right, so that's the episode for this week. Thanks again to Victory Briefs for sponsoring the podcast. You should totally go check out their website and register for their camp if you've not already done so, or at least check out their fantastic articles that they're posting from people like Marshall Thompson or Martin Sigalo, if you can't figure out which is which, one of those people probably. And remember to like our Facebook page, like our Twitter page. Check out our past episodes on SoundCloud or on iTunes. Leave us an iTunes review. If anything in this podcast offended you, or you just want to ask us a question, or you are wondering about some of the drills that we're doing and how you might administer those, just send an email to theargumentclinicpodcast@gmail.com, and we'll be happy to answer all of your questions. We've answered every question so far. Okay, so now on to the most and really only important segment of the podcast, the mini debate. So we've done such story topics as best fruit to best pizza, to best book, I think. Today I'm going to go with best philosopher. Have we already done best philosopher?
No, we have not. Ooh, this is a good one.
Okay, because I know I already ranted about John Dewey chopping wood in Nova Scotia at age 90.
Oh shoot, we might have, because I definitely remember talking about John Locke a lot.
This is a conundrum. Then let's table that topic for a different time. But now I have to think of another topic very quickly. Okay, I thought of one. Okay, so what is the best cartoon? And I think most of our relationships with cartoons go back to when we watched cartoons as kids. And my favorite cartoon as a kid, or at least one of them, was the Teen Titans. I really enjoyed
It's a good one.
That TV show when I was a kid, because it like didn't baby me. It like treated me like more or less like an adult. When I was watching it, but it was still like kind of actiony and like had plot and stuff. So
I've actually never seen the Teen Titans.
Never seen the Teen Titans? I mean, that's
No.
I mean, like, that's acceptable. That's like a reasonable thing. I don't know how, like, how, like, what, I mean, I assume it's just entirely dependent on like what TV channels or whatever that like you had as a kid or something like that, or like what your habits were. Because I know I just like watched Cartoon Network, just like sat in front of the TV and watched it. So eventually it came on. I don't know if you were the same way. Cameron, what is your favorite cartoon, or what is a cartoon you can argue is the best?
Oh gosh. As a kid, my favorite was definitely Scooby-Doo.
Dang it, you
Scooby
they
Doo.
took mine.
I'm actually
That's a
not
strong
sure
choice.
why.
You swiped it from Lawrence. But wait, I guess you and Lawrence could just like team up and just beat me.
I don't know. I have another answer I can go for, but Scooby Doo is very high on my list.
Okay, what are your arguments in favor of Scooby Doo, Cameron?
I don't know. It has good memories associated with it. Actually, that's kind of a lie. There's one Scooby Doo movie that we laughed on like repeat for a whole weekend when my whole family had the flu. But other than that, I really enjoyed watching Scooby Doo. I'm not actually sure why.
When I was a little kid, we had like I remember at one point being trapped at my aunt's house because our parents were like away for some reason, and we had a like little tiny TV, me and my little sister, and we had exactly two movies, right? We had this one Dragon Ball Z movie. Keep in mind, we hadn't seen any Dragon Ball Z up until that point, and would never see any Dragon Ball Z. We just randomly had like movie 4, made no sense to us, and the Jimmy Neutron movie, which I still maintain was great.
Wait, that I've actually seen, I think.
And I think Jimmy Neutron is, by the way, another strong selection for best cartoon. That show was awesome. So what we would do is we would literally like VHS. We would just play the movie, then we rewind the movie, and then we'd play it again. We just loved the Jimmy Neutron movie so much. We just play it on repeat. But I gather that wasn't the same thing for you guys in the Scooby-Doo movie playing on repeat. You just got sick of it.
Yeah, my mom can't watch that movie anymore. Well, not that she would, without feeling like she has the flu. It's quite funny.
Oh wow, that's like sort of terrible.
No, it was a pretty traumatic weekend.
We played that Dragon Ball Z movie so often that the VHS literally broke.
I think that was the Lion King for me.
Okay, so we have Scooby Doo, and we have Teen Titans, and so Lawrence, what are you doing?
So I mentioned this topic earlier, so it's probably not that hard to guess that my favorite cartoon is Star Wars: The Clone Wars, because I'm a true Star Wars fan, a nerd to the heart, and I don't think this answer will surprise anyone. And it's a really good television series that was on Cartoon Network. It's now actually all of the seasons are on Netflix, and it's like pretty highly reviewed in general, not only by like Star Wars fans, but like general people alike. And it just tracks the adventures of Ahsoka Tano, Anakin Skywalker, and Obi-Wan as they fight during the Clone Wars between episodes 2 and 3. And it makes the prequels actually kind of worth watching, because you need to watch the prequels to understand this TV show, which establishes more character development. It has more interesting action scenes. It's really well put together. The stories are good. And the story arcs are all very engaging and interesting. And it gives you like more like insight into the clones, for instance, who are usually just like faceless CGI people in the movies. And I know how terrible and nerdy this must sound, but like I'm a true fan of Star Wars: The Clone Wars, and that is my answer for favorite cartoon. I've watched the series twice.
Well, we have I think 3 different answers. Like,
but in fairness, I think Scooby-Doo is a strong contender, because that was my original first choice, because that's like the first set of cartoons I got to watch, because when I was younger, having Asian parents, television access was relatively restricted. And so I also have like good memories of Scooby-Doo, and it's just like, it's interesting. It promoted like a little bit of critical thinking amongst kids. It was funny. It was clean.
I wonder if we could. So I actually did not watch that much Scooby-Doo as a kid, very little. I wonder if we can find a cartoon that we all actually like watched. Like, so how about this? Have any of you watched? Did any of you watch the Avatar cartoon?
No.
No. That cartoon's actually good. Jimmy Neutron. Was that one that
a little bit, but definitely not as religiously as you.
Jimmy Neutron was okay. So at this point, the debate has reached the length where we need to just abort it, because it's just taken way too long. But so Lawrence, are you just gonna jump ship and just outvote me with Scooby-Doo, or are you gonna?
Or we just like let the viewers decide, because I honestly can't.
But they don't send us emails. If you have a strong opinion about who should have won this debate, send an email to the Argument Clinic Podcast at gmail.com. But as it is, I'm just going to de facto declare Scooby-Doo the winner, because 2 people sort of indicated that they wanted it, and Teen Titans will be left in the dust, unfortunately. Okay, so thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Cameron. You were just a delight, and I'm sure that our listeners appreciated your candor.
Oh, thank you for having me.
All right, so that's the episode for this week, and stay frosty.
No, this isn't an argument.
Yes, it is.
No, it isn't. It's just contradiction.
No, it isn't.
Yes, it is.
It is not.